Kevin Carthew, welcome to the Game Informer Show, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so you are creative director of all of Team17.
Yeah, well, it sounds like quite a lofty statement when you put it like that, but yeah, I'm the creative director at Team17. I've been here for quite a while now. I've been here for 18 years. Seen a lot of games come and go since then. Had a lot of input on a lot of different Worms titles. Yeah.
So 18 years, you've just been immersed in the world of Worms.
Something like that, yeah. So before I joined Team17, it's important to say I was like a huge fan of Team17. I don't think it was a machine that was so popular in the States. You guys know the Amiga home computer?
Yeah, vaguely. It's like Bigfoot for us, but yeah.
That rare, yeah. So Team17 were like the developer back in the day of Amiga games. You know, they were like the premium AAA Amiga developer, and I was such a boring, huge Amiga nerd. I was such a staggering Amiga fanboy, and such a huge fan of the Worms games as well, that I grew up with Team17 games. And you know, it's an absolute dream come true to be able to work at Team17, to eventually get a job at Team17. You know, if you'd have asked my younger teenage self that this is one day what I'd be doing to make a living, you know, I would have taken your hand off, absolutely.
You guys are such an interesting studio. It's one of those things we've just been around for so long, you kind of take it for granted. But you guys are an indie studio that have been around since 1990, fully independent, right? Like, there are very few other game studios. Maybe, can you think of other ones that have been around since before your time, around 1990, that are in a similar spot as you?
I can think of a lot of ones that aren't around anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it is a little bit of a privileged position to have been around for that length of time. Yeah, I guess I put it down to a combination of hard work, owning the IP that we do with Worms, all the effort that we've put into sustaining that IP, keeping it relevant for all this time.
That's what I want to know. This is like a very, very long marriage. I want to know how you spice up a relationship after all these years. How the hell do you guys keep rolling with Worms and still find an audience there?
Well, if I knew how to spice up a marriage right, then I'd probably be doing something else. That would be the secret to everything. Yeah, keeping Worms relevant, I suppose it's a combination of things. We've got a great fan base for one thing, right? We've got a fantastic community. Very vocal fan base as well. We are very keen to take input from the fans. There are certain things about Worms that I think it's very difficult to sort of like put your finger on it being necessarily one thing, but there's an essential look and feel to Worms that when the hardcore fans of the game know that it's authentic, that's kind of like the test that we always have to pass with the game. You know, we've put a lot of time into making sure that WMD passes that test. And then over the years, it's been all sorts of experimentation with the core formula. It's been bringing it to new platforms, an awful lot of decisions that we've had to make over the years to make sure that people still get the game and people still enjoy the game.
You talk about like the look and feel, like Worms W.M.D stands out. It has, I don't know, a simplified art style, a really clean art style that I think works well. Like, what are some of the variants of the past that the audience has kind of revolted against as far as the look and feel of Worms?
I think the big one, the one that comes up time and again, is probably the 3D versions of the game.
Yeah.
So you've got to think back to like when Worms 3D launched and that time frame. Up until that point, and you know, around the time that Worms launched, that was about the time where 3D accelerated graphics were coming in, right? So you had the launch of consoles like the PlayStation, you had dedicated 3D hardware on the PC, and Worms launched at a time that kind of went against all that, and because it went against all that, a lot of people doubted its popularity or doubted its ability to succeed, but it succeeded against all the odds in a market that at the time looked very, very different. I guess there was always that clamour, and there was always people asking, you know, would this game translate to 3D? What would it look like in 3D? And it was a huge technical challenge for us at the time, not just a technical challenge, a design challenge as well. And I can remember so many people within the company were like against the idea. So many people didn't want to touch Worms in 3D. But I guess, you know, there's kind of like what publishers wanted to see, what the fans wanted to see at the time. Everybody was willing us to do it. And so we took that step. I mean, I've always been very happy with how the 3D versions of the games turned out. I thought we did a great job of them, but there are certain elements, certain aspects of the gameplay that just mean that it is that little bit better suited to a 2D experience than a 3D experience. Just by adding that extra dimension inherently adds lots of complexity to what is often seen as a kind of simple pick-up-and-play title on the surface of it.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about like the time frame of the first Worms when it came out. It like launched alongside Rayman on the PlayStation, stuff like that, and now Rayman went 3D. Then Rayman realized, I think we're better in cleaner 2D. Do you feel like Worms is stuck now as a 2D franchise? Do you think is there momentum in the studio to ever try and shift to 3D again?
Honestly, with WMD just having launched, we're really not thinking about it at the present time. We've really more than got our hands full making sure that the WMD launch goes smoothly. I mean, my personal feelings, and I think there's a lot of people out there that agree with me, you know, it absolutely is a 2D game. It's best suited as a 2D game. So no plans at the moment, but I guess you can never say never.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I want to know what. So it seems like Armageddon is like the go-to Worms game. Is that just the one that I love the most, or is that the one that the community is like, that is the king of all Worms?
It's between that and Worms World Party. It's between that and Worms World Party. But I mean, they're the same engine, right? So there's not an awful lot of difference between World Party and Armageddon. Feature set is slightly different. But yeah, and it's not just you. No, it absolutely is the consensus. If you were to do a straw poll of the community, everybody would be telling you Worms Armageddon.
Why that one? Why do you think that one broke through, or like was the cream of the crop for so long?
Again, I think it's one of those things that's really difficult to pin down. When you play Worms Armageddon, when you swing around on the ninja rope, when you see a grenade bouncing around, when you feel the weight of the worms jumping, everything about that game just feels right. Yeah, it feels precise and it feels very, very satisfying to play. In terms of the features, there are other Worms games that do more things than Worms Armageddon, but Worms Armageddon absolutely gets the basics right. And as a jumping off point for Worms WMD, we were always saying to ourselves, you know, the gauntlet laid down, the challenge for our dev team is to make the essential Worms experience. You know, we're not making another Worms game. We're making absolutely the best Worms game that we've ever made before. And we gave our coders a little bit of a headache, I think. But when we were talking about recreating that authenticity of Worms Armageddon, that essential look and feel of the Worms series, we didn't just play Worms Armageddon. We didn't just sit down and discuss it and say, you know, well, it's because the worm jumps exactly this amount of pixels. We literally dug out the old code and had the programmers pour through it and find out what it was exactly that made the game feel so good to play, feel so good in the hands. What was it that gave it that level of precision?
So when I think about your career, 18 years at Team 17, I just imagine 18 years filled with boardroom meetings about ninja rope physics. Is that about sum it up?
That's pretty much it, yeah. 365 days a year, day in, day out. Do you know what? You wouldn't be too far away with the previous game. The ninja rope was such an important thing to get right, and it was so important to have the ninja rope acting properly in Worms WMD. There were an awful amount of discussions that went on with that, and I've seen other games developers face the same challenges that we did. And if a games developer makes a game, a competitive multiplayer game, invariably, if you've got a big community that loves the game, eventually they will start doing things in the game that you had no idea it was even possible to do in the first place. You know, you didn't necessarily program in all these edge cases intentionally. It just so happened that way. And there are some pretty good ropers at Team 17, but nobody sort of like comes up to the scratch of what the community can do. So WMD now, it absolutely is in the hands of the community. The response and the feedback that we've had back so far has been pretty good.
Can you do?
Yeah.
I remember in playing a lot of Armageddon back in the day. It was on mouse and keyboard, and I played WMD on a controller, so maybe that's the difference. But Armageddon, and I'm sure this is this is a rookie comment for you, but like it had that great ability where ninja rope, you launch up, and if you're on a corner, then it would be a little bit buggy, a little bit janky. You get the like bouncing back and forth, and then extend.
Yep.
Can you still do that in WMD, or have you guys ruled that out?
So I think what you're talking about is firing the rope several times really quickly. Yeah?
No, what I'm talking about is launching on a corner and then kind of flicking back and forth. And then when you're horizontal, then you extend the rope to go backwards and higher. Basically,
Yes,
how janky do you want the rope to be, I guess is the question.
No, exactly like that, yes. I mean, but that's not anything that exists in real life. Yeah, there's no analogy for that kind of thing in real life.
I'd argue a worm with a gun is something.
It's called either the Indian rope trick or it's called poling. That's how it's referred to.
Okay.
Some versions of Worms have had a realistic physics simulation. You know, there is nothing realistic about how the classic ninja rope works. But yeah, what you're describing there, you absolutely can do in Worms WMD. If you try to do that same maneuver in some of the other Worms games, some of the previous Worms games, the rope would just collapse in on itself, right? Because it's realistic physics. It's like a real rope. But the ninja rope is I don't know. There's nothing like it really. It's like some weird kind of like extending metal pole in one situation, and then it's more like a rope in other situations.
Yeah, people don't want realism when they're playing a Worms game. They want stuff like the OMG strike and just the most absurd weaponry possible in this game. So it seems to me like one of the biggest design hurdles that you've had to deal with for so many years is just navigating the space in Worms. Like with the ability to blow up the terrain, there's always little nuggets left over, or just a weird indent and crater that's really tough to get around. Do you want to talk about that challenge and how you guys have addressed that for so long?
We don't address it. Honest answer, it's part of the game. It's absolutely part of the game. And yes, some people it drives them absolutely bonkers. Other people accept it. I mean, for a long time there was a Worms fan site running called Blame the Pixel. It was blamethepixel.com, and I think that's exactly what you're talking about. Those tiny little fragments of land. We've had all sorts of discussions about this. We thought, should we clear them up? You know, if the landscape gets below a certain size, should we run some process on it so it cleans up all those untidy little edges? No, I'm afraid it's just part of the game, and it's an essential part of the strategy as well, it would seem.
What a strange thing. All right, I'm in love with communities that you don't think or never really think about, and I imagine the Worms community is passionate as hell. You've mentioned it before. But like, what is the most nitty-gritty issue that is a big discussion point in the Worms community?
Oh gosh, there are several. So one would be exactly what we were just talking about, the essential feel of the ninja rope. There are always debates about how the worm should move, and particularly regarding how the worm should jump. So in Worms Armageddon, jumps are always fixed, right? He always jumps to fixed distance.
Right.
He backflips a fixed distance. For me, that feels very old-fashioned now. And in the more modern versions, and something we kept for Worms WMD, you can influence his jump a little bit, just a little bit, not a lot. If you jump and hold forwards, he will jump a little bit further. If you jump and hold away from the jump, he will jump a little bit shorter. If you just jump, he always jumps a fixed distance. So you can steer him a little bit. I just think it makes the game so much nicer to play. It makes the experience much smoother. And it's something that the purists and the hardcore in the community, I think some of them are dead against it. I think some of them are for it, some of them are dead against it. But I mean, for us, it's always about finding that balance between fan service, appeasing the community, you know, trying to bring as many players from the old games forward into the new games, but at the same time you always have that balance between fan service and trying to bring new players in as well, broadening the audience and appeal to as many players as possible.
Yeah. Is there a competitive scene for Worms? What's that like?
There's a competitive scene amongst the community. It has been at esports events before. I know that there have been small esports tournaments run around Worms Armageddon. The competitive scene in the community is just so interesting. A huge thing for them is customization. They run regularly things like, I think they call it the Worms Olympics, and that's not even necessarily about playing the game in a deathmatch mode per se. It's almost like gymnastics with the ninja rope, or gymnastics with the grenade. Who can make the precise shots, and they almost build their own rules and their own game modes for how the game should be played alongside the deathmatch game.
That's awesome. And like with the different terrain, it'd be tough to have a standard esports. It would vary so much. You need like the equivalent of like Final Destination in Smash Brothers or something like that, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a good point. You absolutely can do it. I mean, the game experience is so customizable. You can turn off random crate drops. You can make sure that the landscape's always fixed by using the same seed. You can have fixed weapon sets, so on and so forth. So the game is so customizable and always has been so customizable that you absolutely can set up fair conditions, but there's always a slight unpredictability. You know, there's always the wind blowing. The wind could go for you or it could go against you.
Yeah. God, do you guys think you'd ever make a big push for esports, or do you guys have meetings around the office every once in a while? Like, maybe we can make this a real esports competitor if we took a certain angle in the future.
Sure, I mean, we've got no plans at the moment, but I was really happy to see one of the first user reviews that came out for Worms W.M.D. I think one of the first lines was something like, "This is the esports version of Worms," and that review is not saying that there are options to make Worms into an esport in Worms W.M.D, because there aren't. But it's just a comment more that this one feels right. There's some precision in this, and again, it comes back to that Worms Armageddon thing of everything feeling good and it feeling like an authentic Worms game.
Yeah. So, just the idea of keeping this franchise alive for so long, I was trying to think in a similar vein of you guys being an indie studio that's been around for so long. I was trying to think of like other franchises that have just hit on a core formula that's so good that you guys can look to as like a model for reinventing slightly but staying faithful. And it's like there's like Tetris, Bomberman, even though that's kind of fallen off. Are there other franchises that you guys look to as models for like a classic, simple, arcadey formula that you have to keep rolling for so long?
Do you know what? It sounds ridiculous to say, but honestly, I don't think there are, and I don't think there are because Worms almost exists in a genre by itself. I mean, yeah, there are other artillery games. There are some other great artillery games out there. We've looked at other artillery games, but we've not necessarily looked at other models or other video games and seen how we can transpose it because I just feel like Worms is so different to everything else out there, right? I mean, we might get some inspiration from the weapons that you see in other games or specific features from other games. You know, and there are things in WMD that were inspired by things in other video games. You know, mounted guns, for example, in WMD absolutely comes from the mounted guns in the early Call of Duty games that we all used to play on the LAN together at Team 17. But with Worms, with the mechanics of Worms being quite dissimilar to everything else out there, there's not necessarily one game that we choose as a template. We're always considering what we'll do within the context of Worms and will it work for Worms and the gameplay dynamics.
So what is it? Is that original formula just so good that it can sustain itself for 20-some years?
It sounds quite blasé when you put it like that. But I don't know, maybe it is. You know, the core formula it seems to me incredibly strong. You know, it almost seems indestructible. And there are definitely decisions that we've made in the past that work better in tandem with the core formula. But it feels like that those fundamentals there are so solid that it almost can withstand any amount of tinkering. The method that we adopted for Worms W.M.D is harking back to the original game is that we kind of like treated everything like a digital sandpit, if you like. You know, that there's not really a great deal of metagame to Worms W.M.D. There's not an awful lot of things that you do outside of the game in order to set up and start playing it. We wanted the game to feel very immediate. And so essentially we were treating it as putting new toys into the sandpit, new toys for the user to play with. If you see a mounted gun in the world, you can have a pretty good idea of how that works. You've seen that before, right? And you can think of how it applies to Worms. If you see vehicles in the game, helicopters, tanks, mech suits, you can have a pretty good idea of how all of those things work. And when you walk over to the vehicle, it flashes up on screen. This is the button that you press to enter the vehicle or leave the vehicle. Once you're inside the vehicle, the tank controls just like a worm. You know that a helicopter's going to fly. How do you fly in Worms on the jetpack? You push up. It all maps quite nicely to the original control scheme.
And the scary thing with the helicopter, too, is when you're just laying waste and flying above the terrain, and then you see the clock counting down, it gets down to 0. Like the first time is like, I don't know what's going to happen. I guess the helicopter just drops out of the sky, and I hope there's not water underneath. It's a scary feeling.
It goes.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
And it happens so often as well. We're seeing so many of the early reviews saying, game's great, helicopter's really difficult to control, though. And it's intentionally difficult to control, right? Because being able to fly anywhere on the map with an unlimited amount of fuel is really, really powerful. And that's always been a huge part of Worms when people get it wrong, and what you're talking about, running out of time, thinking you've got enough retreat time to fly from this island to this island and not quite making it, and your time running out just as you're passing the water, and then really unsatisfactorily for you, but very satisfactorily for everybody watching, you just sink very, very slowly down the screen and end up in the drink at the bottom, and it's bye-bye to your world.
It's perfect. So you guys have had, the Worms franchise going on for so long. It's really interesting to me to have, variants, but a core idea that's always the same, and getting to test that in different markets. Going on mobile, you guys had a Facebook Worms, testing out like the Xbox Live Arcade market. Was there a certain combination that you think worked really well for a marketplace and Worms? Like, where do you feel like there was lightning striking?
That's a really interesting observation, actually. So if you look at the first mobile version of Worms, it's almost exactly the console version of Worms. Worms was incredibly successful on Xbox Live Arcade. It came out at a time where in Xbox Live Arcade games were much more simpler than they are now. Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network, these digital platforms are now just marketplaces. But when these digital platforms first emerged, it was assumed that the titles that worked best on them were simple games, incredibly simple games like Feeding Frenzy or, ports of old arcade games. And Worms seemed to fit quite nicely into that category. So the first Xbox Live Arcade version of Worms was the handheld version, and then the handheld version went directly onto the phone version as well. But while it was still a great game, it wasn't necessarily designed for handhelds, and so I guess as the handheld market expanded, you saw more and more complex games on there. We started making the decision to design for the platform. So now when you play the mobile version of Worms, it is absolutely designed for a mobile platform. The complexity's been toned down a little bit. It's still absolutely Worms. It still contains all the strategy, and it's still recognisably Worms. But certain decisions have been made to make sure that the control scheme works best with Worms. You can't steer the jumps in the mobile versions, for example, because it's a little bit less precise than using a keyboard or a controller. So yeah, we've absolutely designed for platforms in the past.
Yeah. With different platforms in the past too, did you guys have publishers for Worms games, or has Team17 always published your own?
No, we've had publishers for Worms games. I think the very first version of Worms wasn't published by Team17. It wasn't self-published. Team17 as a company, we've always had a mixture of self-publishing, working with publishers, and also publishing games ourselves. We've always, throughout, on and off, helped bring other people's games to market.
Yeah. So what has that process been like? Are you guys publishing more and more as you go on, or do you feel like, because even looking into your history, I didn't even realize that you guys published the original Super Stardust way back in the day. Like, you've been publishing games for a long time.
Yeah. So Super Stardust would have been one of the games we published, one of the first games that we published. I guess back in late 2013, I think it was, our managing director Debbie Bestwick. She's very interested in the commercial side of the business. She's very interested in helping bring other people's games to market as well. And we made, I guess, a decision in earnest to get more involved with that side of things. We thought that it was a great fit for what we've been doing all these years. We've got a big history as a developer. We know an awful lot about different platforms and how to best bring other games to market. We've done it all throughout the years that we've been active as a business. And so this was a side of Team17 that we wanted to bring back. And yeah, like I say, we've been doing it since late 2013. I think it's fair to say that we've made quite a good success of it. We've got some great games on the games label, and I think as well we've got a slightly different perspective on games publishing as compared to other publishers, because we've seen that other side of it, right? Because we've been publishers ourselves. We've been a game developer all these years since 1990. We've helped bring other people's games to market on the past, so we know an awful lot about the business. And I think, like I say, we can add something to the publishing business. We can give something a little bit different. We can perhaps give something that traditional publishers can't.
Yeah. So what is the role of traditional publishers as you see it in 2016? Would you ever need to go back to them?
Do we ever need to go back to traditional publishers? I don't think they've ever really gone away. I think there'll always be a place for that. Why wouldn't there be a place for that? I mean, the side of marketing a game, bringing a game to market, doing the community management, doing the PR, all of that is so different and so complex compared to just building a game by yourself. Indie developers, the guy who comes straight out of university, makes a great game and has a huge hit. Building a game is so different from the business of bringing a game to market and getting the word out there too.
So do you think Team17 is just going to publish their own stuff into the future, or do you feel like you as a developer would ever need that strong arm of marketing?
Well, we have all of that within the operation ourselves. We have 2 offices now. We have a game developer side of things. We have a publishing side of things as well. We have an entire team that does life cycle management, PR, marketing, community management. That is all part of what Team17 does in 2016, and we have been doing for years now.
Yeah. God, and you guys have cranked out some good stuff. Like, people are excited about Ukulele. You guys did Overcooked, right?
Yeah, fantastic game, unbelievable couch co-op multiplayer game. Great response, great reviews coming in. Fantastic to see it doing well, made by a couple of great guys. That was a personal favourite within the offices. When we first saw that game, not a lot of work got done for a couple of days. We're just having a blast with that, and we've helped bring that game to market for those guys. It's been a success so far, and that's what the publishing side of the business is all about.
You want to talk about the British gaming development scene? It seems like you guys are steering a little bit more in that direction. Is just such a tight community that British developers are going to think of coming to Team 17 as a publisher?
I hope that it's not just British developers. I hope that it seems like we're making a little bit of a name for ourselves. As you know, the indie community is kind of like tight knit in pockets. We know developers who know one another. I think word of mouth spreads like that. I hope that it's not just British developers, but developers all around the world come to Team 17 for what it is that we can offer.
What do you think about the health of the British game development scene these days?
What do I think about the health of it?
Yeah.
I think it seems to be in rude health. So ourselves as an example, I think we've just launched the best version of Worms that we've ever made before. You're probably familiar and you've seen a lot of what's going on with Ukulele. Looks like an incredible title. Things seem to be on the up and up for the British game development scene.
My dream, and this is just to be nerdy, is doing research on Team 17. Originally, the studio was called 17-bit, right?
Kind of. So before Team 17, we were shareware or a public domain library. Well, it's not quite right to say that we were. There was another business called 17-bit Software, where some of the original staff members from 17-bit went on to found Team 17. Do you know what a public domain library is? Are you familiar with shareware?
Loosely, I guess. I don't know how you make money off it.
So kind of the days before the internet, right? Before it was easy to distribute files, you would have public domain libraries or shareware libraries, literally a dark room with banks of glowing monitors, tons of floppy disks, and a catalogue of all sorts of things, demonstrations. They'd make a copy for you, you take it home, give it a play, and that's how software used to be distributed. And the name 17-bit was because the popular games machines and consoles at the time were 16-bit, right? So it's a dreadful pun. It was that bit better than the rest, and 17-bit went on to become Team 17.
And now you realize that there is a game development studio now out of Japan called 17-bit. They made like Skulls of the Shogun
right.
And Galaxy.
Yeah, there is as well, isn't there? Yeah, that's a fact that I keep forgetting. I remember seeing Skulls of the Shogun and playing it and thinking, hang on a minute, this name seems familiar.
But please, in the future, if Team 17 could publish a 17-bit game, it'd be this great union of the worlds, I feel like.
Like we'd come full circle, right?
You really would. So you've been there for 18 years. What was the craziest time you can remember? Was there a game development period that's really the highlight, that's like a legend within the studio of like, man, I can't believe we got that out the door?
Wow. That's putting me on the spot a bit. WMD's been quite tough development, great development as well, but it's been tough in the closing stages.
What makes it tough?
I think what makes it tough is people always underestimate the complexity of a Worms game, right? And I think part of the reason why they underestimate the complexity is because of its roots. Okay, so the first version of Worms, quite a simple game, or simple on the surface, but its history, as you know, Worms is the archetypal classic indie game. It was developed by one guy in his bedroom at the time, and he developed it as an excuse not to do his maths A-level homework or something to just amuse his friends. And it grew into what it's grown into now, this huge British video gaming success story. But over the years, all the time we're developing Worms, we're adding complexity to it. The games are growing in the feature set. And the Worm now is, he's quite a complex character in video games. He has an awful lot of things that he has to interact with. All of those weapons, all of those things that happen in the game environment, all within a fully per pixel destructible terrain. So the tree of possibilities of things that can happen in a Worms game, it's not a narrow tree, it's a vast tree, it's a massive tree, and all those interactions have to be looked after, and not only looked after in a single player environment, they have to be looked after in a fully networked online 6-player experience where there are 48 worms on the landscape and a possibility of 80 weapons, and now it's not just worms playing against each other. You've thrown buildings, vehicles, mounted guns into the equation. So we often say deceptively simple, but Worms is pick up and play. People can have a good time with it without necessarily having to know the finer details. But what keeps people coming back to it is the depth in strategy. You don't look at it and think, that's a hardcore strategy game, but it absolutely is. It just presents itself as, this game about flatulent exploding sheep and exploding little old ladies and holy hand grenades and concrete donkeys that fall from the sky and blast through the landscape. But underneath all that is an incredibly competitive experience where, the deep thinking and the strategy, all of those underlying mechanics absolutely play a part in whether you're successful or whether you're unsuccessful.
Yeah. How do you keep the studio motivated? And, you hear about people working on Call of Duty series for 8 years and getting burned out and franchise fatigue. How much do you worry about that? How do you keep the team motivated?
Honestly, it's not an issue keeping the team motivated. I think people must think that 18 years this guy's been working on Worms games all his life. But that was an absolute dream for me. As I said before, I joined Team17. It was a dream to be joining Team17. It's still a dream come true to be here. We've got a number of members of staff who are in the same situation as me. We've even got a couple of guys, you probably won't believe me when I say it, but we've even got a couple of guys who've been here a little bit longer than I have. So some of us have grown up together, and we've worked hard together, and we've formed friendships together. And Worms is as I've already alluded to, is a great British success story. It's been around a long time. It's got a hardcore fan base. When you're working with something like that, keeping people motivated it's not a problem at all. People are happy and excited to be working on Worms, and we're always excited to be working on the next Worms game as well.
And there's always an audience funneling money into Team17 for those Worms games.
yeah, but at the same time, we're always doing something new with it, right? So WMD has a wealth of features, a wealth of things that have never been seen in a Worms game before, and all implemented in a way that I don't think it steps on the toes of the core concepts. If anything, I think it improves the core concept.
So you guys have worked so hard on the Worms series and Worms W.M.D. I'm wondering if there's anything else recently that Team17 has done, or things in your past that you think the team's really proud of, that you want to call out, like other projects?
Sure. I mean, so one thing that we do as a games label, as a publisher, that I think is really interesting is that we're not just about deadlines or working with other people, or saying you as a developer deliver this, we'll stick it on a store for you, we'll market it, we'll promote it for you. So we sometimes co-develop with these guys as well. So good examples recently. We helped bring Escapist to console, and we were involved in a little bit of the design decisions that were made in the Escapist as well. I'm not claiming credit for the Escapist. The Escapist is absolutely Chris Davis's baby. It's his game. But I think Chris himself was acknowledged that Team17 played a significant part in some of the decisions that formed the Escapist and went on to make the Escapist the success it has been. Other games like Sheltered as well. We co-developed Sheltered with the guys, so it's not just a case of Sonny and Dean working on the game in isolation. They came into our offices. They worked with our development team. There's a significant part of Team17 in some of these indie games that we're also helping bring to market. And when I'm talking about, Team17 have a different take on publishing, or have a different take on our games label, that is also a big part of what we do, that as a developer, we can also offer to help co-develop these games. We can help with game design, we can help with technical issues, we can help with art direction. Is also a big part of what we do as a games label.
Nice. And so the future of Team17 involves more publishing, more Worms. Is there motivation for more new IP coming out of the development side?
We're always looking at new IP. We've got so many ideas on the boil. So many things happen within the studio that the wider public don't necessarily see or don't make it out there. And there's a whole host of reasons for that. But it wasn't too long ago that we were making Alien Breed, for example, with the Unreal Engine, the Alien Breed series. A couple of years ago, we released a puzzle game which was okay. It was kind of set in the Worms universe, but we made a puzzle game called Flockers. So I think there's this perception that as a studio, that it's nothing but Worms. But if you look at the games that we've released in our track record, it's actually, it doesn't tell the entire story. We are most famous for Worms, but we absolutely develop other games at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, to close it out, I'm wondering what anomalies have occurred in the Worms series. Like, apparently you guys were going to make a version for the Virtual Boy way back in the day. And I'm wondering, like, what is the strangest thing in Worms' history that people would be surprised to learn? Like, Have you guys ever sold crazy merchandise of like a life-size worm or anything like that? There's got to be some weird thing in the annals of history with Team 17.
If you talk about merchandise, if you were to visit our offices, the first thing that you would see in the stairwell downstairs, you would see a life-size worm. Okay, so that is the worm suit, and I think, thankfully for me, you know, I'm not the tallest guy, but I think I'm a little bit too tall to don the worm suit at shows. And I've seen what happens to people when they come out of the worm suit. When you go to E3 or Gamescom and you are the poor unfortunate soul tasked with donning the worm suit and going for a walk, I've seen people almost die in that worm suit. It's that serious. Interesting you should mention the Virtual Boy, because I actually got blamed for the Virtual Boy dev kit going missing. So we did look at developing a Worms game for the Virtual Boy. I remember for the longest time walking into the warehouse where we kept all the old consoles and all the old game machines, and for the longest time you knew where the Virtual Boy was, and I think one day it just disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if somebody nicked it, but that was pinned on me for a little while. Somebody was saying, "You're a big Nintendo fan. Have you got the Virtual Boy? Did you sell the Virtual Boy on eBay?" And it was like, no, of course I didn't sell the Virtual Boy on eBay. I wouldn't do that. I do love games, and I like Nintendo games and Nintendo memorabilia, but no, you can't pin that one on me. No, not guilty, I'm afraid.
So this is like before the Virtual Boy came out?
This was after the Virtual Boy came out. You know, I'm talking in recent living memory. We still had a Virtual Boy dev kit knocking around somewhere at the studio.
Oh, wow. What does the dev kit look like?
This is probably about 5 years ago or something.
What does the actual dev kit look like for the Virtual Boy?
It just looks like a Virtual Boy.
Oh, man. The mind is racing. The imagination is soaring.
The possibilities, right?
What makes you such a Nintendo fan?
I'm a fan of gaming in general. I grew up at the same time that I grew up with my Amiga. I was a huge Team 17 fan. I guess the Amiga allowed you to do a little bit more. You know, you could do a little bit of graphic design and programming. But, you know, I always had a Game Boy. I always had a SNES. So it's just the stuff that I grew up with. And, you know, obviously they make fantastic games, right?
Yeah. So it must be a real thrill whenever you get to work with them, like Open Warfare on the DS. Was that published by Nintendo then?
No, it wasn't published by Nintendo. Who was the publisher? I think the publisher was THQ. I think the publisher was THQ.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Fantastic working with the hardware. Yeah, whenever you get the dev kits in. I mean, we made a version of Worms for the Wii, and for the longest time we were trying to solve problems such as, you know, throwing grenades with a gesture on, so on and so forth. We had so many prototypes where throwing the grenade was literally just a flick of the wrist instead of using a power bar. Yeah, surprisingly hard to get that stuff right, but really good fun to try.
Do you ever get any feedback from Miyamoto on the Worms series? Does he ever check out any of your games at E3 or anything?
Oh heck no. I don't. No, we've never had anything from Miyamoto on the Worms series. You know, I'd like to see what he had to say, but nothing so far.
I'll get Worms on the NX. Maybe he'd, you know, swing by the booth at a certain point.
All right, yeah, I'll get right on it after this.
Well, no, Kevin, congratulations on Worms W.M.D. I played just a little bit last night and seems super solid. It's going to be a go-to party game for sure.
No, well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to hear it.